My name's Tom. I'm from Hackoustic, but not everyone up here is from Hackoustic. Myself and Tim run Hackoustic, and you would have seen some of our artists and family members out in the hallway making lots of amazing noises. We also have Helen and Kol JIT. I'm going to get them to talk about themselves a little bit in a minute. We're going to talk and discuss the current state of the maker movement in regards to musical instruments, instrument building, hobbyists who don't realise that their hobbies are amazing, and what we are trying to do in London to try and promote this kind of movement. Does anyone not know what the maker movement is sort of about? Yes, awesome. You did say don't know. Yeah, good. No, it's good. It means I can explain it. So the maker movement is a result of a lot of the technologies becoming very affordable. I'm talking about microcontrollers like Arduinos and Raspberry Pis and small-scale cheap electronics that allow you to control the real world with sensors or digital information. And it's very accessible. There's loads of people doing it, not just with music, but with all sorts all over the world. And it's a big community of people just building stuff. It's like the current day tinkers. People who just like to make things and create amazing things. We sort of, well, me, I was a musician. I see myself more as a maker now, but my focus is still on musical instrument and musical instrument building. And I like to combine that kind of technology with the instruments that I build. I might as well, I'm going to get you guys to talk about yourselves and introduce themselves, and then I might talk about myself a bit more in a bit. I'm going to sit down as well because I feel funny. Helen.
Hi, my name's Helen. I'm an education writer who specialises in new technologies. I do a lot of stuff with microcontrollers, electronics, and creative technologies. I'm maker in residence at Machines Room and have done various residencies in China as well, which is a very interesting place for maker stuff. I do a lot of my making using musical instruments in schools and universities. I put music into computer science classrooms and physics classrooms. There's no money, obviously, as we all know, for the arts in schools anymore, which is kind of depressing, so I try and sneak it in physics and computer science. Making cool MIDI instruments, DIY magnetic guitars. I do breadboard synthesizers to teach the basics of electronics and also the physics of electricity. But I feel like not only is it a way of sneaking music into the curriculum and art into the curriculum, it's a really good way of teaching these things that can be quite esoteric. So that's why I use making in my education writing and also in my workshops, because I think it's actually A, really engaging and interesting, and B, kind of hopefully breaking down the barriers between these serious subjects and the creative arts. So yeah, that's what I do with making.
Hi, I'm Tim Yates. I'm one of the co-founders of Hackoustic. I'm also a sound artist and a musician. I've got one of my projects out there, so I like to make interactive musical instruments of all kinds. I like to think about instruments in a different way, so that I'm classically trained. I studied very hard classical guitar and got somewhat tired of practicing 10,000 hours to play the same pieces that everybody else played. And I wanted to kind of have a different experience of music and sound, and so I started to play with objects and toys and sandpaper and stones and those kinds of things, and found it much more musically rewarding and fun and interesting, and just discovered that there was so much out there that you can find if you're prepared to kind of let go of your idea of what a musical instrument is and start to think of it as just a machine for exploring sound. And so what I like to do is build instruments that kind of look like a musical instrument and kind of don't look like a musical instrument, and nobody knows quite what to expect. So when they come to it, they don't come with the baggage of a piano or violin, 10,000 hours of practice, and those kinds of things. But they come thinking, oh, this is an interesting thing, let me just try it. And then they find something and they discover something. And I think in the kind of maker world that we're doing, there's lots and lots of people who are making those kinds of things that aren't necessarily things that fit into easy categories. They're not necessarily just a musical instrument or just a piece of art or just a piece of engineering. They're things that cross all of those kinds of boundaries, and you can't always say what it is, but it is really, really interesting. And so part of the thing that we're doing with Hackoustic is for there to be a place where those kinds of things can be, and have a platform, and you can have a scientist and a musician and an engineer and an artist all showing their amazing stuff in this one place. It doesn't have to be an art gallery, it doesn't have to be a gig, it can just be a really interesting, engaging experience. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from with the hacking stuff that I'm doing, and Hackoustic as well. So, Kol JIT.
Thanks. My name is Kol JIT, and I spell it Kuljit. And a few weeks ago I was at the BBC and they gave me a name badge spelled Kulgit, which is Kuljit. So I was very pleased with that. But anyway, so I'm a record producer, musician, and a composer. My main instrument is the tabla drum. Some of you may know they're like sort of Indian bongos, but they sound nothing like bongos. They sound amazing. And ever since I was a kid, I always thought that I think music is magic. You know, you can't see music, but it can make you dance, it can make you cry, make you laugh. And also, we always say that music transcends boundaries, it brings people together. And quite sort of later, when I was a teenager, I realised that there were only Indian people playing Indian instruments. And I thought, there's definitely something wrong with that. And so I began to explore more about how Indian music is represented, especially in the Western world. I do a lot of theatre music. So I recently was in a show called Bend It Like Beckham. I was also in a show called Bombay Dreams. And those of you that know about Western musical theatre, you know that we do the same show 8 times a week. So, as an Indian musician that is normally trained to go off on some massive 1-hour improvisation, you can't do that in a show while the actors are going, have you finished yet? So the idea really is to create repertoire for Indian music. So Indian music is normally taught orally through a guru-disciple system. And I think it's amazing if you're the disciple, but if you're living in Stockton and you haven't got access to a guru, it can be quite difficult. So what we've created recently is a notation system for tabla. So it's the world's first notation system, so you can actually write down tabla music. It also means you can compose a piece of tabla music and then have someone else play it, which in India is unheard of, because Indian musicians, if you think of Ravi Shankar, for example, Indian musicians are composers and performers at the same time, and therefore there's no need in writing anything down. So sheet music in Indian music doesn't actually exist, which is also a bit strange in the Western world. It just means that the music can't travel, nor can other people enjoy playing it. So the tabla notation system will hopefully open up that world of sheet music and allow other people to play tabla. It also allows people to learn to play tabla. If you've got a very simple sort of knowledge of music, you can actually pick up a tabla drum and go left, right, close, closed, open, close, and suddenly you're making music straight away without having to sit at the feet of a guru and light a joss stick, for example. This is all fueled by my passion to demystify Indian music, because I think Indian music is shrouded in magic and mystery. When you watch a guitarist play, most people go, "Oh my God, that's amazing! Where do I learn to do that?" But if you watch a tabla player play or a sitar player, you go, "Oh my God, that's amazing! There's no way I can do that." So in a way, I think us Indians are sort of responsible for pushing people away. And I've performed, since I was sort of 10 years old, but when I do perform on stage, it's usually under the banner of East meets West. And I'm a bit sick of that phrase, because I always think, haven't we met before? So this East meets, this sort of this vicious circle carries on, and East keeps meeting West. I don't even know where East is, to be honest, but, and I'm definitely not from the East, I'm from Southall, which is probably in the West. So the whole idea of this, there's a sort of fascination with East meets West, which sort of keeps the two worlds apart. And I think we've had enough of that. It's now time for everyone to enjoy Indian music and learn to play Indian instruments. You don't need to wear a sombrero to play Spanish guitar, nor do you wear a grass skirt and coconuts to play marimba. So why can't you play a tabla? So that's, you can come and talk to us outside at the Kol Music is the name of my company, and we have products in line with demystifying Indian music and making Indian drumming more accessible for for people so that school teachers can also teach it in their classrooms. Sorry, was that really long?
Yeah,
okay.
that's all right. You're interesting.
So where Kol JIT and making comes in is he's also got a prototype electronic tablet, which is, again, a world first, and it's powered by a board called a Baler, or Baler. I asked the guy who invented it, and both those pronunciations are correct. And it was developed at Queen Mary University, and it's basically the gold standard for micro-computing for audio. So Arduinos and Raspberry Pis are fantastic, and you can do loads, but a lot of their processing's power gets sucked up by stuff other than audio. So Baler is just an incredible example of how the academic world is pushing the maker scene as well, because loads of amazing projects have been made from this board using interactive audio things.
There's also some, talking of microcontrollers and seeing as the BBC were just on, there's a really great board that I use a lot in schools called the BBC Microbit, which is an extremely accessible artists and primary school children friendly platform. So you can just drag board blocks across. So it's a really great introduction into microcontrollers. It's much easier than the Arduino.
I'm very jealous of the kids in school at the moment because they're getting a lot of this stuff in their curriculum and in their classrooms, and you know more about this than I do. Also, you've seen how it is in China at the moment compared to over here.
So, I mean, when you say the term making, as someone who's worked in education my whole life, I kind of think, well, it's a little bit of a buzzword, to be honest, at the moment. I mean, when you're talking about making in schools, making is really just what we'd call hands-on learning, right? It's constructivism, it's Papert, it's a tale as old as time, really. But it's great practice educationally, and this kind of advent of cheap physical computing devices, cheap sensing, and this resurgence of electronics, because electronics and design technology kind of just disappeared from a normal school curriculum. It was defunded, it was desperately unsexy, and this kind of resurgence of the maker movement has helped people to understand that actually these kind of skills might be worthwhile. So we're having a bit of a resurgence at the moment, and the kids, as Tom just said, the kids are actually really starting now to do block-based coding from the age of 7 in primary schools, and every single, 1 million children got a microbit last year. Every single year 7 in a state school got a microbit, access to a microbit. Of course, people don't, so this is actually quite an exciting time watching these kids come up and what they're technically able to do, and the creative projects that they're making by having access to this kind of technology is really exciting. It's really cool.
Tim, do you want to talk a little bit about the type of events that Hackoustic have done recently? There's a really big scene in London at the moment with instrument builders and hackers. We've got just a few of... So there's 4 of us who run Hackoustic. There's myself, there's Tim, there's Nick Murray, and then there's Stephanie down the front here. And whenever we do events, we tend to collect artists as we go, and I'm kind of calling it our family. And, well, there we are. That's good timing. So we just did a 4-day festival at Truman Brewery where we had about 30 different artists from mostly London showcasing their amazing projects and musical things. So Tim, talk about that.
The nice thing that we find, when we started Hackoustic, it was meant to just like a place for people who were making these kinds of projects to go and build stuff together and exchange expertise and stuff. And actually what we found is that people wanted to come along and see this stuff happening. And then people would come and see it and be inspired and go away and then maybe come back to us and with build projects and start showing them. The nice thing we find is that almost every time we go somewhere, we meet another person who's making another really cool thing, and they might not have even thought that it's art or it's music or it's anything. It's just something they're doing for the hell of it, some crazy instrument. And then we've got this kind of wonderful platform that almost anyone can come and show their work, and it doesn't have to be finished, doesn't have to be perfect. It can just be something interesting, and it's kind of really fun to be able to have, like Kol JIT's project, which is going to be a production thing. So, from people just making their very first thing at college, they've got a place where they can come and show it. And because it's the maker culture and the hacker culture, there's a kind of understanding that not everything has to be absolutely perfect, smooth, finished, polished in every way. It can still be really valuable and really interesting, and even a prototype that is just the first step along the way is something that people want to see and want to be able to engage with.
That
and
community is really important because you come along and you actually, it's understood that you can show a work in progress, and people are interested in how you've done something and the workings and your failures along the way. So it's more like a learning community than a performing community, which is really special.
And the nice thing is that when we take that out into the general public, we get the same response. So actually, people are happy to understand where a particular project is or a particular idea is, and they can have a go and it works, or maybe it doesn't perfectly work or whatever. But as long as it's interesting enough to be worth having a go at, then it's worth showing. And so it's really nice to be able to do that. And the nice thing we're having, like at We Are Robots and some of the other events we've done, is the response we get is just fantastic, really positive from just the spectrum of people who love it is great. And so it's really exciting. I think people are open to these kinds of ideas, and it's exciting to be able to show it, and we're trying to get it out there as much as we can, because the more we do, the more people respond, and then the more interesting artists we meet, and so on and so forth. So it's a really virtuous cycle at the moment. It's great.
I had one question for Kol JIT, which is you've built a brand new instrument. Has that actually changed your creative practice much? Because you've been developing it for quite a while, or a few years. Has that process sparked any creative differences?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose what it has done is enabled me to think more about how music is created. I come from an engineering background. I was a very good Indian boy and became a civil engineer, and then jacked it in and went into music full time. So I sort of feel that have begun to sort of devolve as a musician and sort of evolve as a maker in a strange sort of way. So it's affected how I perform, how I compose. Because I want people to say, I want to do that, and I can do that.
What timing are we on? 4 minutes. Okay, a minute each, I guess. I'm going to perform on this one at the end. Yeah. So Hackoustic, we've got our Christmas party on Saturday. There's a couple of tickets still left if you're interested in coming.
It's going to be great. Come.
I'm playing a breadboard.
Excellent.
Oh yeah, we're going to do a Hackoustic orchestra where I'm going to conduct a whole bunch of different projects to try and make some sort of nice sound. It's going to be interesting.
It's going to be like Beethoven or something.
If you haven't had a chance yet, we've got Sam Battle at the front with his synth bike, which is incredible. He's just built a flamethrower organ, which is...
That was awesome, by the way. Oh, my God.
We also have Andrew Hockey out there with his Marble Run, which is, again, incredible. And Jen Hagen is with us with a beautiful Doppler machine, which she has built. If you got anything else you want to add or plug?
There's a couple of us actually from Hackoustic who are recording on the BBC tomorrow. We're doing a BBC Click Boxing Day programme on music technology, so listen to that. That should be quite fun. No, that's it, really. Follow me on Twitter.
I think you should play.
Kol JIT, anything to plug?
No,
Okay, well, definitely check out the Keda Music stand as well. There you go, here's his plug. So this is one of my instruments. I specialise in recycled materials. This is called the Springy Thing. And it embodies one of the ethoses of Hackoustic, which is about finding incredible sounds in unusual places. So this is made from the springs of an angle-poised lamp, a coil from a pond pump motor, and magnets, and that's it. There's nothing else in between. The sounds that you're going to hear are completely organic as well. There'll be no filters or reverb or nothing between this and the speakers. I might use the loop station if I'm feeling up to it.